Oh, you're looking bad. Yeah, I know he want it. Go throw it, babe. He gon' creep up on it. This space can't tell no lies when you look into my eyes. You know I want you deep into my thighs. There ain't no compromise. You made me wanna cry.
So I attended the first meeting of the Democratic candidates running for governor. It was a candidate forum that was sponsored by an organization called Main Street Action, and they are, it looks like a national organization. I never heard of them before, but they were their presenting sponsor. Them and Civic Media, who's Dan Schaefer, who I think is like a political commentator, political reporter for Civic Media. Civic Media was the moderator. Some of you may know that Civic Media recently acquired WNOV, which I find very ironic because at this candidate forum, the first meeting of the 7 candidates running for governor as Democrats in the state of Wisconsin, there was next to no African Americans there, and it was shameful because African Americans and our voter participation for the Democrats very well may determine who gets elected governor in the state of Wisconsin. And the fact that Civic Media did tout that they recently purchased WNOV but did not use that platform, to the best of my knowledge, did not use their platform to promote and discuss the candidate forum is shameful, but I also think it's indicative of when white companies and white corporations buy black radio stations. They lack an understanding of how important we actually are. Black people are always an afterthought, and that was put on full display by the number of people that were there. It was a packed house. It was at the Cooperage. For those of you who may not have been to the Cooperage before, it's like a music venue type bar. It's hard to explain. It probably has a capacity of 175, 200 people, and it was at capacity. It was standing room only, as you could imagine. People wanting to see these 7 Democratic candidates facing off in their first candidate forum, essentially of 2026, and it was overwhelmingly white liberals. And so here's basically what the format was. Each candidate got about a minute to introduce themselves, and then they got a minute roughly to answer a question. And the individuals who were coming up to the stage and asking the questions, it was not the moderator, Dan Schaefer. He wasn't asking the questions. He was kind of moving the program along. But the people that were asking the questions of the candidates weren't even from Milwaukee. I just found that a little disingenuous because if you're going to have this candidate forum in the largest city and the biggest Democratic voting city in the state, there was only one person from Milwaukee that even asked the questions of the candidate. So a little bit about this organization, Main Street Action. Main Street Action, they say from their website, organizes trusted small business owners and working families to demand a government that works for Main Street. They say that we center the real affordability, healthcare, and childcare pressures people face, flooding media and ads with their stories and turn that credibility into political power to call out obstruction, elevate champions, and advance policies that help local economies thrive. So that was the organization that presented the candidate forum. They're overwhelmingly liberal. They are in Wisconsin. They operate in Virginia, Iowa, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Michigan. And they made no bones about it, especially with the questions that were asked. They were overwhelmingly about expanding Badger care in the state of Wisconsin and making childcare more affordable for working families, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really troubled by the lack of African Americans that were there. And Civic Media, I think, bears some responsibility to use their newly acquired black platform to try and get more of us in the room. Of the individuals that were there, and I'll give you the candidate names in just a second, Kelda Roys, who is a now 2-time gubernatorial candidate. She ran in 2018, did not fare very well in that Democratic primary. As you know, Tony Evers won that primary and ultimately won the election. She actually had great command of the stage. She was seated right in the middle. She projected a lot of confidence. I thought that her answers were spot on, but here's the problem. If you went to that candidate forum being unfamiliar with her and the other candidates, you would think that Kelda would make a fantastic governor. And I think she's great. I've known Kelda for 20 years. She can't win. She does not have the appeal and has never had the appeal. And this is no strike against her. You got to have a certain je ne sais quoi to entice Wisconsin voters. And also at forums like this where they were heavy on policy and what they would do if they got elected governor, which also is an afterthought if there's not a Democratic Wisconsin State Senate and State Assembly. So it was all like these wishful things that they would do. But it also seemed like until the very last question, which dealt with immigrants and Donald Trump and ICE, they almost were answering the questions as if the regular Democratic, liberal, left leaning platitudes work. They don't. We live in a different era, but it seems when you get a bunch of Democrats together led by civic media, they were pretending like Donald Trump does not exist. So at the very last question was basically about, oh, what would you do to protect people in Wisconsin from immigration and customs enforcement? And nobody really gave any major standout answers because also as governor, there's not a whole hell of a lot that you can do when it comes to what Donald Trump is doing and how he is essentially sending his federal paramilitary organization known as ICE into the state. So all in all, I wasn't really moved. There was very little daylight between the candidates, as my colleague Kristen Bry from WTMJ said. She was also in attendance. I'm going to talk more about the candidate forum tomorrow, and hopefully some of you that are listening to this may have attended the candidate forum. I highly doubt it because I probably would have seen you, but overwhelming, no. Somewhat disappointing, yes. Do I feel that Mandela Barnes, because of his name identification, because he's a known Democrat and in some parts of the state, he's probably more trusted? Do I think that he potentially could edge out the other 6 Democrats and get the nomination? Yes. Mandela Barnes, unfortunately, will not be able to beat Tom Tiffany. Tom Tiffany will likely be the Republican nominee. And so I'm troubled by a number of things, especially because the lack of outreach to the black community, because you got to engage us early. Because I don't know if the African American community is trusting white folks right now. And if they are putting on and sponsoring these candidate debates and they have a black platform like Civic Media does, and they were one of the presenting sponsors of this candidate forum, but they weren't using their platform of WNOV to engage the African American community, I think that it's the same old thing. White people need to stop buying black media because they don't know how to utilize it. And they try and use it for their opportunities and their money-making benefit, but they lose sight of the importance of the African American community uses our media platforms so that we can get information as black folks so we can make political decisions that impact everybody's goddamn lives. So I'm likely going to lament about this for the foreseeable future, but I'll talk more about it on The Truth with Sherwin Hughes tomorrow morning. I'm going to post a link to the candidate forum so you can see for yourself. And I'd love to get your thoughts, feelings, and opinions. So I'm going to find the link to the candidate forum. I'm going to post it in the Hughes Views 414 Facebook group, and then you'll be able to see the candidate forum for yourself. All in all, Francesca Hong, who is a Democratic Socialist, I think she projected a great confidence. Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, who made it very, very clear that she's a nurse by trade and worked for a hospital, so obviously her answers on healthcare were very thoughtful. But she didn't sound like a lieutenant governor. Joe Brennan was one of the few people that brought up Tony Evers. Not enough of the candidates that are running to replace Tony Evers brought him up. Tony Evers is still very popular amongst Democrats in this state. A lot of the people that were on that stage worked with Tony Evers. Missy Hughes has got an infinite amount of business experience, but I don't know if she was able to pierce through and really make a name for herself because her working in the Evers administration in WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, gives her tremendous business acumen, but Wisconsin voters need more than someone who is business savvy. Mandela Barnes gave the same platitudes. You're not going to hear anything new from Mandela Barnes. David Crowley is the only executive that was on that stage. I thought his opening speech was thoughtful. It was conscientious. And I think that he struck all of the tones that he needed to strike. But keep in mind, David Crowley in this campaign is going to have to be as perfect, if not more, than Barack Obama. So I'll talk more about this on the program tomorrow. And I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to this lamenting. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.